Welcome to the Palm Springs Linguist channel. Tell me, what is Algospeak?
Well, Algospeak, which is a blend of algorithm and speak, is a way that social media users can subvert the content filters, the algorithm that is used to raise the rank or lower the rank of content on social media.
I know that a little all too well, being a content creator on YouTube. I've encountered that a little bit myself. There was a video that I put out, and of course, I know like some videos are going to be more popular than others, but there was one that I did around Halloween time that was synonyms for and euphemisms for death. And I was using, I went to the Los Angeles Haunted Hayride, so it was kind of a fun atmosphere, but it was all, synonyms for death. And the algorithm hated it, absolutely hated it. And it's not just that it was unpopular, because I get that some of my videos might not be as popular as others, but clearly YouTube didn't want to show it to anybody. I talked it over with a buddy, and they said, well, dude, you said death like 200 times.
Yes.
So the algorithm thought, didn't know what kind of video this really was. And they didn't realize that this was just a very simple English language video. And it was nice and innocent.
Yes. And that's one of the issues with the algorithm is it can't distinguish context.
I came across your blog, and I've been reading your blog for a while. I really enjoy it. And when I came across your article on Algospeak, when I first saw the word, my mind went to Spanish, algo, which means something in Spanish. And I'm like, what is this? And of course, as I'm reading, I'm like, oh, algorithm. And then it all clicked. I'm like, oh, actually, this is a really fascinating topic. And after reading that blog, I knew I wanted to talk to you in person. So thank you. So tell us, who is Linguistics Girl, and how did you discover Algospeak?
Well, I am Heather, Linguistics Girl. I've been writing my website for over a decade now. I started when I was an undergrad. I was in English studies. I did go on to get a master's in English studies with a concentration in linguistics. That's one of my masters. Yeah. And I have been studying grammar and language since then. It's my passion. I just love language.
And whenever I read your blogs about linguistics, I love it because you speak my language.
Yes.
Not only do you use the technical jargon, of course you explain it, for people that don't understand it, who haven't, had the training in it like we have. But it's so often when you read things about the English language or any other language, it's so watered down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that with you. And I really enjoy that.
I am all about the correct terms, which is part of my thoughts on Algospeak.
So tell me, what's a typical example of Algospeak?
Okay, so I had not heard this word until a week before I wrote that blog post. And I started looking into it because I had joined TikTok to promote my grammar books and my grammar website.
So on TikTok, what's your name on TikTok so people can find you there?
So for my TikTok, I'm on there as FF Grammar. So form function grammar. It's at FF Grammar.
Okay, very good. And I'll put a link to that in the description below so that people can link directly to it. Excellent.
I'm also on there for the parenting part of my blogging because I am a mother of 4. It's all related because I write my own grammar materials for my kids because I didn't like what was out there.
Yeah.
But I got on there, and as the parenting side, I started getting some things about fertility fraud, including one comedian, and she kept using the term swimmers instead of sperm. And I was like, that is so weird because sperm, egg, those are just the correct medical terms. I'm like, why is she using this? And another example was a drag queen. Drag queen story time is fabulous. but they were sharing this story about someone coming into their DMs and threatening them with a boom boom stick. I was like, what the heck is a boom boom stick? It sounds like, to me, like one of those children's toys that make noise. Like,
Yeah.
Flip them. But he was actually referring to guns. So I'm like, what is going on with this switching these words for other words on specifically TikTok is where I noticed it, but then I started noticing it on other social media.
Since I've read your blog post about this, I've noticed examples, and I was watching Dr. Mike on YouTube the other day, and he said something to the effect of, "This is a bunch of ish."
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, he's using Algospeak.
Yes,
because
that's
I know
another
what he meant,
one.
but that's not what he said.
No, yes. And sometimes there's a disconnect where people will say things, but then in the captions they'll do the Algospeak. So it's very interesting phenomenon. So I posed the question on Twitter. I was like, what is going on here? And a couple of people came back and said, look up Algospeak. That's what it's called. So I did, and it's really this fascinating example of language change in the moment, like in real time.
And you've talked a lot about language change in your blogs at times, and that's certainly a topic that interests me as well. It's interesting that that here's an example of technology that's spurring humans to change and evolve the language.
It is. When you mention that, it makes me think of how the printing press actually almost kind of slowed down language change a little bit, because when it's spoken, it's spoken, it's gone, it's in the air, it's ephemeral. Right. And then we were able to standardize language once we started writing it down. So language change, it still happens, but in the print form, it's slower to change than in the spoken. And then technology, it's changing even faster. You learn one Algospeak thing, and the next day that might not even be used anymore.
I feel like there's times too that when something is in writing, that people, even if it's not something that's currently said that much, or or maybe an old spelling or something like that, and then people see it in writing, even though it's not really currently being used, and they think, oh, well, this is the way we're supposed to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, and then there's the prescriptivist mindset rather than, accepting the fact that language change is normal and it's inevitable.
Yes.
So what's going to be interesting now is to see these examples of Algospeak and to see if that penetrates the language into use when you're not interacting with technology.
It is, and it kind of has, because so one of the things that the algorithm doesn't like is talking about mental health and neurodiversity. And I follow a bunch of ADHD creators, and they were using the term neurospicy. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. That really captures, the brain of those with ADHD and autism and stuff, that spiciness. And it turns out that they had started using that because it didn't like the term neurodivergent. So they switched it to neurospicy. And I've heard neurospicy, out in the wild, not on social media. So that one's kind of taken hold.
That's a situation that kind of makes me sad. Not using the term neurospicy, like that's a fun way to frame it. It's positive. I like that. But the reason they feel they have to do it, that makes me sad.
Yes, the whole, we can't talk about ourselves and this community and this, it's a medical thing. It's a brain thing. Like, it's just science. But we can't say neurodivergent without our content being hidden or, even banned and deleted from social media.
Yeah, it's I just put out, most of my videos are about language and linguistics, and I do a little bit of Disney theme parks, because I used to work in Disney theme parks. But I have a passion for the movie The Rocky Horror Picture Show. So I just came out with a video about the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I noticed in the first 24 hours that algorithm didn't like it. And so I talked it over with a buddy, and we're trying to figure out, again, like, it's one thing if it's unpopular, but if it's not even, they don't even try to show it to people, you figure there's something in there that they don't like, the algorithm
Right.
doesn't like. And all we could come up with is that it had, in the description, it had the word blasphemous. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to revise the description and take out the word blasphemous and see if it helps.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm never sure, like, what words can I use? I mean,
Yeah.
For my parenting blog, I make some, like, cleaning videos, and those really fascinate me, watching them and making them. And I'm like, what can I say? I said the cat went potty on the beanbag. I'm like, can I say, like, how is potty okay? I mean, that's a kitty term. Is that going to get me blocked or what? Like, I don't know what words I can use, even if they're innocent words or correct medical words. Like,
yes,
silly. Like, how silly do I have to get into describing something like, washing cloth diapers? Like, how far in do we have to get?
That's something that I find really interesting. It's like, certain topics obviously are adult topics, and I kind of get it a little more with those. But like you said, using correct medical terms, that can, at times you need Algospeak for that. But then there's some topics that don't seem like the filters should care about. Like, so what are some, like, either extreme examples or maybe a clever example that you've encountered of Algospeak? What's one that sticks out to you?
So the clever one is still the neurospicy. I really like that one. The extreme ones, though, and as a parent, this is also why I've been looking up these lists of these Algospeaks, is the way criminals, people with bad intents, are using this language to subvert these filters to sell drugs to kids.
Oh.
And I've seen this on the news where, sadly, like, teenagers have died and their parents later find out, they bought these drugs on TikTok. Snapchat was the big one. And I was like, how are kids using Snapchat to buy drugs? And it turns out that they're using this coded language to, the drug dealers are communicating with them, and they're able to get, things sent to their house and coding the PayPal transaction so it looks like something innocent. And that just blew my mind, because I was like, I wouldn't even know how to go about doing that. I'm like, I'm still the mindset, you go down to the street corner and there's the shady looking guy, and that's not how it is with technology anymore. Which that dates me a little, but
you made me think about just now about coded language. And of course, Algospeak is coded language. And I thought to myself, well, what are other examples of coded language? And it made me think, like, whenever there's a group that doesn't want to be open with everybody about being a group, I think back to, like, the 1980s and, gay people. And that, during the 1980s, they had to be careful who they were open with. So a lot of coded language that if you're in on the coded language, you would pick up on it and go, oh, okay, it's safe to talk in front of this person.
Yes.
I bet you there's all sorts of scenarios beyond just gay people where that's coded speech is a thing.
And sadly, you mentioned LGBTQ community, they're still dealing with that on social media. That's another one that's the algorithm doesn't like. So if you ever see someone say, I'm the dollar bean, it means lesbian, because they started by replacing the S with the dollar sign, and then now they're just saying the dollar bean. And cornucopia does not mean the horn of plenty. It's homophobia, because those words, they can't even talk about them on the platform without it getting dinged. And other coded language, the thing I first thought of when I started looking into this, because one of the things that stood out was nip nops. I was like, that sounds really, like, playful, instead of nipples. And it
Oh,
made me think of Cockney rhyming slang.
oh yeah.
Yeah, because it was very this playful, almost rhymey, sing-songiness, and that's what it made me think of.
Yeah. Like you either want something that semantically means something very similar or the same thing, or you want something that kind of sounds like it. Like when I heard Dr. Mike say that's a bunch of ish.
Yes.
Well, that obviously that sounds like the word he's trying to say, but it has some of the same phonemes, but it doesn't semantically mean anything.
Yeah, it's like my
Similar.
grandma who used to be like, "Oh, sugar," like,
Yeah. Yeah.
as much as she would swear.
So of course you've explained to us that the reason for Algospeak is to avoid the content filters, the algorithm screening you and censoring you. What when the internet was newer, what were some ways that people did that back then?
Yeah, so a lot of what they started with has kind of developed into Algospeak, so you can see the evolution of the language change. So like I'm old enough to remember chat rooms, and you go in and you'd write ASL, and it did not stand for American Sign Language. It was age, sex, location, and that's the one that still sticks out to me. So using these like acronyms, and we use them now still. We have like BRB is be right back, LOL, or just lol. So that's one that's actually made it into the speech. It's gone from an abbreviation to people just saying lol instead of that's funny or whatever. Like LMAO, laugh my ass off, and things like that to get around the content filters. But there was also this thing called leet speech, so LEET speech, or leet speak, and it was a clip of elite. And that was what they were calling where you like replace like the S with the $sign or the A with an @ sign, or you use the backwards Cyrillic R instead of a regular R to get around, because algorithms are completely literal. They can't look at that and say, "Oh, I know what you're saying." They're like, "Oh, that's a $sign. That's cool. Let it through."
So because they're literal, well, first of all, that's why Algospeak is effective, because it's literal. So you're not actually saying what you mean, but it's coded in a way that most people hearing it is going to understand it. Does Algospeak change and evolve?
So yes, I mean, you could see back from when the internet first came out to when it started really getting big, when I was a teenager, and all these, I am and AIM. I don't think that's even a thing anymore. But that alone, America Instant Messenger. But it's still changing, because in order for the algorithms to get smarter, people have to input these new things. So as soon as someone inputs it into the algorithm, you have to change it. So that's why you see this evolution of, even lol sometimes gets flagged. So people started putting, like the null symbol in there, or 101 for lol, like because someone put lol into this algorithm. And that's another example of you never know what's going to get flagged. Like, why is LOL?
It seems so innocent.
It does seem so innocent. And like, I would love to speak to these algorithm creators and be like, what is your reasoning for putting something like LOL in there?
And what's baffling as a content creator is, they don't tell you what the words are. You don't know what words. I mean, some are common sense. If it's a real adult topic or a scandalous topic, it's like, okay, you gather that's more likely to be one of the words. But there's all sorts of other words where they seem so innocent, and you don't know.
Yeah, you never know. And like some of them you can appreciate, when they put on a trigger warning for things like, SA, which means sexual assault. I mean, if you've gone through that could be a trigger. That's good to know. Like, I should, scroll away from this if it's going to trigger. A lot of content creators will come out and say, like, I'm going to be talking about this. If you don't want to hear it, take care of you, scroll away. I'm not offended.
Yeah.
So, and those are more adult topics, and social media, it's technically for age 13 up, but we know that younger kids are on there.
Right.
That's a whole different issue, but
right. Certainly there's far more access to material than when I was a kid, at least.
Oh yeah, so much more. Like navigating it as a parent. Like my oldest has a smartphone, but we have all the blocks on it. But she has in the past, gotten around some of those things. So it's a game of cat and mouse almost, like keeping up with.
Well, just like when I was a kid, there's, even though we didn't have the technology and it wasn't as easy, we still found ways around the system that we had.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's always going to be parents trying to catch the kids thinking they got away with it, but parents actually knowing what's going on and monitoring it from a distance.
Okay, so what I know that I've read either in your blog or on some of your tweets, because I follow you on both those ways, that you've been critical of some Algospeak. And so tell me why, and what context are you critical of Algospeak?
So the context that I started with was learning about fertility fraud and the creator having to say swimmers instead of sperm. And I'm like, this is literally talking to parents and donor conceived people about their conception and the biological facts, the male sex cell. Like that's what it's called. It's a sperm. Like that's not a bad word. And by having to use this coded language, this cutesy language, that one, it sends the message that, these things are bad. We shouldn't be talking about them. Kind of makes them bad. So there's one problem. And the second problem that immediately came to mind is when we have to say things like nip-nops instead of nipples. One of the things that many children's organizations recommend is, using the correct medical terms to prevent child abuse. Because a lot of times abusers will use these cutesy terms and be like, don't tell mommy that we touched your cookie. And you're like, what the heck does that mean? Like, that sounds cute. I mean, oh yeah, cookies are fine when they mean like vagina or vulva, like, which again are not dirty words. They're not bad words. That's a medical term. And it really surprised me seeing the need to use these covert terms, because like a lot of the things I follow are like medical professionals, OBGYNs who, that's the term. Yeah, I would not go to an OBGYN who was like, let's check out the nip-nops. And I'm like what? I'd be like, what? Something is wrong with you. You're a medical professional. Use the medical word.
Yes, and if you're, we go to the internet to get lots of information, and if something's not super serious and pressing, even if we have a doctor's appointment, we're probably going to go on the internet and look it up, and then we're going to go to the doctor and we're going to get clarification. And if we have a theory, we'll get it validated. So if they're not using correct terms, that I totally see why that's a huge issue.
Yes, especially in those contexts. And that's another thing I'm critical of, is this lack of human oversight of these algorithms.
Yeah.
Because if you're just going to outright ban the word gun, then we can't talk about, the prevention of gun violence. We can't make videos teaching kids, what do you do if you find a gun? I mean, here's what you do if you find a boom boom stick. I mean, really, is that as serious? Does that show how serious it is to children?
Yeah, this topic is way too serious to use cutesy coded language.
Yes. So we need to see the context. Like if you're spamming the comments, threatening people, that is one thing versus, how do we, gun violence prevention? That is completely different than someone going around threatening people with a gun in comments.
And I do get that, some of these words a small percentage of the use of this word is going to be in a context where, either there should be some censorship or some filter. But the vast majority of it, no. And then that's where, when you made the comment about, some human oversight of this, I can see how that's really important, because you want the vast majority of these contexts to go uncensored. And then the small area where, maybe they're using, it's a flag that maybe there's some kind of threat or menace. Well, then, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's
using
why you need that human element. You can't just rely on the algorithm. And that's another one of the problems is, you said you don't know what words you can't use, and then there's no way to appeal when if your video gets taken down, and there's no way to find out, like, is my video not doing well because the algorithm suppressed it, or is it just people don't like it?
Right. That's information that's super valuable to a content creator. If you knew the difference. Yeah, that would be wonderful if they just simply said, we found these flags in your video, we're suppressing it, and then, if you disagree with this, then, here's the channels to try to get them to override it. And then maybe at that point, a human could take a look and make a judgment call.
Exactly.
Like with my video about the euphemisms for death. I mean, it's super innocent.
Yes, it's about the language, and not wishing death upon people or unaliving them. That's another one I see a lot. Like, you use unalive instead of kill, or or die. The person unalived.
When I read that in your blog, that made me laugh so hard, because it's just so ridiculous use of a word. But it reminded me of a Simpsons episode, like early Simpsons, like in the first 5 to 6 years. There was a Halloween episode, and there were zombies in the episode, and the zombies are marching. And then there's Bart and Lisa are hiding behind a tombstone, and they're scared of the zombies. And then Lisa makes a comment about, "Oh, look, Bart, there's zombies." And then Bart gets mad at her and scolds her and said, "Lisa, they prefer to be called the living impaired."
Yes. The Simpsons is a treasure trove of linguistics. It's just great.
I've actually done a couple of episodes about the Simpsons. I did one called A Linguist Reacts to the Simpsons.
Yes, I've seen that. And that's where I got one of my favorite words when talking about language is cromulent.
Yes.
That's a perfectly cromulent word.
It feels so much like a linguist made that up, because it fits the patterns of phonology of English perfectly, even though it's not actually a word that people had used, prior to that point. Now it is a word. It
is very much a word. And I still get people who are like, what does cromulent mean? And I have to explain the whole story of what it is. But The Simpsons is great for language.
Okay, so we talked about the downside. Is there any upside to Algospeak?
There are. So first, it's, being able to get past the algorithm. That was the whole point of it. So people have figured out how to get their content out there. Like I said, with the neurospicy, I know where to look. If I'm looking up, ADHD or autism, I might not find as much, but I'm looking under neurospicy. There's going to be more good stuff out there because it's pushed up in the algorithms. The creative expression. I mean, some of these Algospeak terms are just very creative and fun. Some of them we've already talked about. And even things like calling guns boom boom sticks has its place if you're trying to be intentionally silly. But if I'm going to Washington to protest gun violence, I'd be a little silly being like, down with the boom boom stick. It just doesn't work.
It's hard enough to get yourself to get people to take you seriously in the first place, let alone using some Algospeak.
Yes, we could switch that around though. Maybe people wouldn't want to be known for having boom boom sticks if it's going to be so silly. I don't know. Maybe we can subvert that to make it less silly. But so the creativity is out there.
Yeah.
And then it's community building, because those in the know, like you said about the 80s and, the with the gays and lesbians and knowing who to talk to based on the coded language. It's the
Right.
same thing. You might have found your community when you know you're using the words they're using.
Absolutely.
So you can weed out, those who aren't in the know.
Absolutely. Just like when we speak a certain language, like, with certain people, as my Spanish has improved, I'll speak Spanish with them, just as a bonding thing. But that's true even within just a single language. I'm going to speak to you in a specific way to make a connection and to have that bond there, because we're speaking in a similar way, and we can, from that. I mean, look how excited I was just to read your blogs and, hear the linguistic jargon being used correctly.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, like I'm definitely more interested in language posts where they're using the terms correctly. So I know they're my people. Like it's that.
Yeah. When following you and reading your blogs and everything, the point where I was like, okay, I really like her, was when you kind of you were talking about determiners versus adjectives. Yes. And how people, get those confused. And
it's a hill I will die on.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Yes. I'm like, I don't care how many dictionaries you found where you looked up a certain word and it said it's an adjective. It's not an adjective.
Yes, I will go down on that hill. Determiners are not adjectives.
I used to, I came, after I got my linguistics degree, I went into education, and I was a teacher myself, and I eventually went into professional development and led language development in a school district. So I would give professional development for teachers, usually in the area of language development. And, and we had this discussion because there was a specific grade level where they're supposed to teach, according to the standards, they're supposed to teach determiners. So, I of course, I took that opportunity to make sure that every teacher, at least from that grade level, has a really crystal clear understanding of the difference between an adjective and a determiner, so that they can be explicit with kids and use the correct terms with kids. Even though they're in first grade, it's like, there's no reason to call this the wrong thing.
Yes, the example, I have a friend who teaches spelling, and she says if kids can learn words like stegosaurus and tyrannosaurus, they can learn things like morpheme and grapheme and determiner.
Yes.
Kids are smart.
I made the comparison with determiners and adjectives with Pluto. That I grew up being told that Pluto was a planet. It's not a planet. And still to this day, you will find plenty of reference materials that are either older or they just haven't kept up with the times, where it's going to say that it's a planet. Well, just because you found it, in multiple locations doesn't mean it's true. If you talk to people that have expertise in this area, they're going to tell you it's not a planet. That's the way I feel about determiners.
Yes. It's science has to be open to change. If you're not open to change, it's not science. And that's one of the things I like about linguistics is it's language. So we kind of think about the artsy side of language, but this is the science side. It's the best of both worlds, art and science.
Yes. Yeah, and it's endlessly fascinating. I've ever since I got my degree, I actually got my degree in linguistics because I was avoiding finishing off a French degree. Because I'd actually really enjoyed my classes in French, but then it was time for some French literature classes, and I'm like, I don't even want English literature, let alone French literature. So I quickly scoured through to see, like, okay, where would my French classes count? And they counted in linguistics. So I switched to linguistics, and it was the best thing I ever did, because still to this day, I remember everything every professor ever told me from linguistics. I loved it. And I know you have that love for linguistics as well.
Oh, yes, definitely. Still studying it to this day. Like, my kids are like, Mom, we don't want to hear about this anymore. We don't care about determiners. Like, you should.
Okay, so tell people, where can they find you online? Where can they find your content online?
So my main language website is Linguistics Girl.
Okay.
And I am on Twitter and Facebook for that.
Okay.
I also have my grammar series, which is form function grammar. It's the FF grammar. And I'm on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I also study spelling and reading.
Okay.
So that is teach a student to read.
Okay. So teachers will be interested in this as well.
Yes, I
And
created
parents.
a reading program, spelling program based off of structured word inquiry. Have to give a shout out to LEX, the Linguist Educator Exchange. Gina Cook is who got me into spelling, my love of spelling. Now, I used to hate spelling, but now it is endlessly fascinating to me as well. So okay, I'm all over the place but it's all language, just anything language related.
Okay, so for the viewers out there, look in the description. We'll have links to as many of those things as we can get down in there so that they can access all your content and find you online and follow you on Twitter and TikTok and everywhere else.
Yes, and
Thank
I love
you so
to
much.
engage. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer things because I love talking about the language. So
excellent. You're a great resource.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. This was really fun. And it's so, after following you for so long on Twitter and getting into conversations with you and reading your blog and everything, it's so nice to meet you.
Yes, and putting a face to especially your YouTube. Like, I knew the videos and talking to you directly is great.
Thank you very much.